Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. We're making some budget-friendly farmhouse, rustic, everyday DIYs today for home decor. I am crafting my stash as much as possible, working through the things that I have, trying to pick up very little to complete projects, but I'm excited with how these DIYs came out. I hope that you enjoy them. Let's get started with the first one. This first DIY, I had this glass bottle. Pretty sure I picked this up from Walmart on clearance a while ago. And I was like, I'm sure I can get this label off. So I ended up not filming all of this, but I first tried scraping it and it was not coming off at all. So what I ended up doing was soaking a paper towel in vinegar, and apparently I didn't film that, put it in a Ziploc baggie and let it sit. Now ended up letting this sit for like weeks because I moved on to other projects. So in turn, the lid got rusty, which ended up working out for my rustic vibe. But this really only would have taken like probably 24 hours. So I am going to just carefully take this out to not get like rust and all the things everywhere. Take the lid off. We will just leave that as is. And as you can see, at first it's like, okay, did anything happen here? But I use just this like little scraper tool that you would use to like scrape stuff off of your dishes. And it just came off no problem. And this tool is not going to scratch the glass either. And so the vinegar worked really, really good for this label. And I was very excited because that just gave me a clean slate for a farmhouse piece. So once I had the label off, I did clean the whole outside with some rubbing alcohol to just make sure there was no residue, there was no fingerprints or anything like that. And then I'm just using some tools that I had on hand to keep this bottle from rolling. And then I have a piece of vinyl that was given to me by a friend, which is awesome because I don't have a vinyl cutting machine. And I'm just going to put this on, my head's going to get in the way, but we're going to put this on, doing my best to center it. And I thought that this little vinyl piece will look really pretty with like an initial in the middle. And so that's what I'm going to do. You could also stencil on the same type of thing with paint. So if you don't have any vinyl, and then I'm using a pair of tweezers. I love using those for applying stickers. And this is just a poster sticker from the Dollar Tree in there. I think it might be in like their school / like office area. And that's it. I ended up not Mod Podging the vinyl or the sticker, but you can if you want. I am Mod Podging the lid. I use a matte finish because I wanted it to still look like the matte finish, but I didn't want the rust pieces to keep flaking off in my decor. So I did put a coat of Mod Podge on this. And this jar is very pretty displayed with a lid on, but I think it would also be pretty with it displayed off and just some floral stems in there. It's kind of hard to get a good shot of this because it's glass and the lighting and all of the reflections, but I love how it came out. For this next one, this was originally a sign from the Dollar Tree that I have previously painted and DIY'd. So take a sign, a frame, whatever you've got. For the background here, I am cutting down some cardstock. This is like a craft paper color cardstock. I got this from HTV Ront. I got a big pack of it because I love rustic-y decor, and so I thought this was a good thing to have on hand. So what I did was I cut mine down to the size of the frame, like where the white part is, which originally was, like I said, a picture that I'd previously painted over. And my paper cutter unfortunately didn't allow me to use the paper cutter for both sides, so I carefully traced a straight line and cut that out. And I wanted it to like slide under the frame so that you wouldn't see any white peeking out. So that's why I'm doing it the way that I'm doing it. But you don't have to do that, and you may not need to, depending on what you are DIYing with. So what I did was saw that it fit, pulled it out, and then I put on a good layer of Mod Podge. This cardstock is pretty thick, so I wasn't really worried about it getting like super wrinkly or anything. And so I put a good coat in there, and I tried to move pretty quickly because I didn't want it to get tacky before I could like maneuver this in there and slide it underneath the frame. And once it got to where I wanted it, I did use, well, here I'm just using a paper towel, but then I'm going to use this little squeegee scraper tool. It's like rubber. This is from the company Plaid that makes Mod Podge. And then I put some blocks, I put them in like each of the corners and then put a weight down because I was really concerned about like the corners like adhering really well. So that's what I did. Once that was dry, I pulled these rulers out of my stash. I have had these in my stash forever. I remember I used to see DIYs with them all the time, never could find the rulers, finally found them. and then did nothing with them. So I'm going to use a couple packs today, and we're going to build out our frame to be a little bit, chunkier than what this sign came with. So I'm cutting it down to size, and I'm going to cut it a little bit bigger than the frame so it hangs over. So I just figured out how I wanted that to look, and we're going to cut these out. I am going to use 2 packs altogether, and I'm using my miter saw, my miter box, and for the ones that I wanted the same, I taped them together and cut them at the same time so that they would be more uniform, and then I did sand down any rough edges and smoothed that out. Then also from my stash, I have this chicken wire, and we're going to cut this down to size. Now, because I was trying to glue the chicken wire and the wood frame pieces, I wanted the chicken wire to be sandwiched in between and stick really good. So this took a while because I took a couple of steps to do it, but I took some Gorilla household glue and some E6000 and then lined up the chicken wire and then placed the ruler on top, and then I put something down to weight that down until the glue fully dried. I didn't feel like hot glue was going to be good enough. This was me figuring out what I wanted to do, and I was like, no, I need something heavy, and my head of course kept getting in the way. But I have a container for like scrapbook paper that's pretty heavy, and I laid that down, and I just did one section at a time so that I knew it was going to stick really, really good. So I didn't show you all of that, but I did want to take the time to explain how I did that. And I thought the chicken wire would be best like kind of sandwiched in between these pieces. Now I did put the top side of the ruler, so the top side of the ruler went down, and so there wasn't as much material because it was, there's layers to it. You would know if you saw it, but that may not be the case for yours. You could also use painter sticks, which would be totally flat. So I won't take too much more time on that. So now I'm just using some lightweight spackling to fill this in. It wasn't completely even. I didn't need it perfect because I was going for rustic, but I did fill that in and let that dry. And then I just had shoved and folded a piece of computer paper on the chicken wire because I didn't want to get anything in that because we're going to paint the frame. So once the spackling was dry, I sanded it down. Again, we're just going for rough, so it didn't need to be like perfect there. And then I'm going to use a chippy brush, but do a pretty good coat with the chippy brush of just some white chalk paint. If you are enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up. That helps me out a lot. It lets me know that you're enjoying my video, but also that kind of positive, well, really any engagement, lets YouTube know that people are enjoying it, and it makes them more likely to share my video with other viewers, so that helps me out so much. Also, subscribe if you're new. If you're not subscribed, I share budget-friendly DIYs on this channel. I'd love for you to be a part of my YouTube family. It's okay to plug ourselves. We're supposed to do that. I just don't always remember. All right, so up next from my stash, something else that a friend sent to me were these molds, these resin molds. I do not have any molds. I've never worked with resin, not yet. Maybe someday I'll venture into it, but I haven't really wanted to get all of the things for it yet. But so I had a friend that sent me these, and that was awesome. So I'm giving them a good coat of white paint, just trying to make sure you get into all the grooves. These molds are so detailed, so I didn't want to, miss any of those details. So now we're going to go in and do some distressing or texture or whatever you want to call it on our frame. I'm using a stencil brush from the Dollar Tree, very little brown paint. I'm using up what's in my stash. I think this might be burnt umber. I don't know, but I'm just using what I've got. And I'm just going to add on layers of that until it looks the way that I wanted it to look. I didn't want a flat white frame. So that's just my personal preference. And then we're going to go in with that stencil brush and go over these molds. And I probably should have put some clear wax on this first. That might have made it easier to wipe off, but it ended up working out just fine. But I would recommend that if you're trying this. And I think I knew that. I just, forgot when I was in the middle of it. So I'm just using a little bit of paint. Try not to go too heavy, and then I can go back. But I just wanted to bring out all of those details. And I wanted to do it with just brown because I was going for a more rustic farmhouse, like neutral feel, but you of course can add in color wherever you want. You do yours DIYs to fit your style, but I just kind of kept going and building on it until I liked the way it looked. Missed a couple letters there. Okay, everything is dry. Pulling out my paper here, and now this part here, I'm going to take you on a tiny little journey I was like, how am I gonna glue this? I needed them to adhere and the chicken wire was gonna bounce up. So I'm gonna explain it to you and then show you as little of this as possible. I took some popsicle sticks and I used a combination of the Gorilla household glue and some some hot glue. And I'm attaching a piece of a popsicle stick underneath the chicken wire so that it would have something to grab onto of more like without the chicken wire being in the way as much. So then I did the same to attach the resin piece. And after a little bit, I realized that the hot glue, it was just still moving around because the household glue hadn't dried yet and the hot glue dried without attaching it. I'm not really sure what the problem was. So I peeled it off. Ultimately, what I ended up doing was realizing I needed to build up that popsicle stick a little bit higher. So I ended up doing that a little bit with this piece. When you cut the popsicle stick into smaller pieces, they tend to break. So we're gonna skip ahead here to the last resin piece to show you how I think works best. So what I decided to do, I pulled out a smaller popsicle stick and cut a small piece that would fit behind the resin piece, but I took two pieces, glued them together just with some hot glue. Then I attached this underneath the chicken wire where there was plenty of surface for me to attach my medallion or the resin piece, whatever you want to say it. Still did the combination of the hot glue and the household glue, and then I let that dry with some weights on top of it. And ultimately, I really love how this sign came out. Let me know what you think about it. I wanted to do something without words because a lot of my stuff does have words. For this next piece, I'm going to start where the footage starts. So I'm taking a tumbling tower block and I am gluing that inside of a lid from a jar. I'm using E6000, what was that, in hot glue or was that household glue? Now I'm not even sure what I'm doing. Yeah, hot glue. Okay. And I'm putting some extra glue around the rim. But what I'm needing to do is attach this metal lid to the bottom of this terracotta tray. I picked these up at Hobby Lobby. I'm trying to remember how much they were. It was a pack of like 6 of them for only a couple of dollars. I think they were marked down to, I want to say like $1.99, maybe $2.99. But I put that tumbling tower block because I needed some more surface to attach the two pieces. So this is going to seem like we're going all over the place, but it's going to come together. Now I'm taking some wood signs. These are also, I think, clearance from Hobby Lobby, or you could pick up something from Dollar Tree or Dollar General, wherever. Sanding them down, and we're going to attach these two pieces. What we're making is some candlesticks. And I love the big, beautiful candlesticks, but they can be pretty pricey, and I thought it would be fun to try to make my own. So for this, I'm going to use some household glue and some wood glue. With these materials, I probably should have just skipped the hot glue because it did create a little bit of a gap, but we will fix that. And I'm weighting them down, letting them dry. And then I'm taking some pieces outside to my garage to spray paint. Those little pieces of tape are to block off the places where I'm going to need to glue things, and I should have done that more precisely, but I didn't. I just kind of estimated, so I had to go back and do some touch-up paint later. But we're going to give all of these pieces a base coat of white spray paint. I did a matte finish, and then we're going to go in with some Waverly chalk paint in the color white. And I'm going to give all of these pieces. So the bottom with the jar lid and then the two square pieces are going to be the two bases for a set of candlesticks. And then I have those terracotta trays, and each of those are going to be the tops to my candlesticks with some spindles in between. It's all going to make sense here in just a minute. But I wanted to have the finish of the chalk paint, but I just thought that the porous materials might do better with a base of spray paint. So now I'm showing you that there was some gaps there from the hot glue where it just wasn't super tight fit. So I went in with some lightweight spackling, and I'm going to smear that all in there. Now, I may have been able to avoid that if I had not used hot glue, but I think I still would have needed it on this round piece. So once again, I'm just smushing that in there, letting that dry, and I should have done that before I did it, a coat of paint, but hindsight's 20/20. And then I was trying to sand off the excess spackling, but I didn't want to peel off any of this paint, especially on this material, this terracotta and the metal. So I just was very, very careful to only sand right where there was some chunks of the spackling. I hope it's all making sense. Hopefully seeing it explains it more than what my words can do. So once I had all of those gaps cleaned up, I went in and did one more coat of the white chalk paint. Probably wouldn't have taken so many coats if I had, done that in a different order. But, I have these ideas in my head, but making them come to life, sometimes I figure that part out as it goes. So I just like to show you guys the real life. This is what we call the creative process. That is how we justify and explain our mistakes. It's part of the creative process. So now we're going to move on to the spindles. This was in my stash and I am sanding them down, and they just were a little bit, they needed to be smoothed out. They weren't perfectly smooth. Like, that's not what I was going for, but I just also wanted to clean them up. So I'm sanding them down just pretty lightly. I tried to do like wrap the sandpaper around the top part of the spindles, and then it just kind of shredded, but it's okay. I did the best I could. We got them cleaned up was the main thing. So once I sanded it down, I did wipe it down with like a baby wipe, and then I let it dry because obviously the wood got a little wet from the baby wipe, and we're going to just let that dry. Now I'm going to stain these spindles with some antique wax by Waverly. I'm getting to the bottom of my bottle. I've told you, crafting my stash, using up everything I got. And this might have been easier to use with a paintbrush and then wipe it off with a baby wipe because I was trying to get in all of the little grooves on the spindle, but it's okay. Either way, it happened. And in the end, that is all that really matters, is that it happened. Now, these candlesticks, I'm going to be using my battery operated flameless candles. So I'm not super worried about like how stable it is, although it did end up being very stable. I'm going to show you the process for that as well. But if you have all wood pieces, you could also just drill a hole, screw it in, do all of that. But that's not what I had. And I was going with what I could find that I either had on hand or that was super budget friendly. And when I found those terracotta pieces, they were very budget friendly. So that's what we went with. So we're going to stain this, wipe with some antique wax, and then I did go in with just a paper towel and wipe off any excess and let them dry. All right, so now it comes to assembling, and this is when I was like, I really should have paid more attention to the painter's tape. I should have actually measured the tops and bottoms of the spindles and then cut out painter's tape that was slightly smaller, so that there was no paint that I needed to like touch up. But right now we're working on the tops of the candlesticks. I just used E6000 and wiped off any excess, and this held really well. The wood with the terracotta, the E6000 was totally adequate. I did weight it down. I think I stacked on some paint bottles and let it dry before I worked on the bottom piece because I wanted to make sure it was staying good. So when we get to the bottom piece, this was a learning curve. The metal did not work super great. So the square base, which was also like a wood / like MDF type of sign, that worked really good. But this one here, I could tell after waiting quite a while that it was rocking. I could tell it did not adhere. So I was like, okay, I'm not really sure what to do here. So what I ended up doing was going in with some more E6000, which again, that may have just been the piece that I should have skipped. I don't know, but I went in with my Gorilla household glue, and this ended up working great. So use what you've got. Because of the surfaces, that's where I wasn't really sure what to do, but have no fear. Where there's a will, there's a way. Persevere, keep going. So once everything was good and dry, I could tell it was nice and sturdy. I went in with some white paint and a small paintbrush and touch up any of the areas that didn't get painted initially. So do better in the beginning and you won't have to do this, but it's okay. It didn't take that long. And then I wanted to seal this whole piece, so I'm using some DIY clear wax and just a clean cloth, and I'm just wiping that on. And I was a little bit nervous because I was like, I don't want to put any pressure and like I don't want anything to break. But it was sturdy, but I did hold each piece, especially when I did like the top part. I held onto it so that I wasn't rocking it too much. But I wiped it on, and then I did go in with a second clean cloth and just really buffed it in. But you could also use Mod Podge if you don't have the clear wax. And I just did this on the whole candlestick. And that is it for these candlesticks. Once again, I had a hard time with the filming because there was lots of shadows, but I was so happy with how these came out. Tell me what you might have done differently, give some more ideas, but I was pleased with them in the end. For this last DIY, I have a metal cutting, or not cutting board, a metal clipboard that I pulled the clip part off of. If you saw a recent video of mine, I used another one of these. I had two of them in my stash. So what we're going to do is give this a coat of Mod Podge so that it will take to paint better, just because it is a metal piece. But you can use, anything you've got to be the base for a sign. Once that Mod Podge was nice and dry, I gave it a couple coats of Waverly chalk paint in the color white, or I think it's Snow White. But yes, just a couple of coats of that. It did take two coats to have good coverage and not have the streaks. So just make sure you let it dry adequately in between your coats of paint. Now, once that paint was dry, I did put in another coat of Mod Podge. This time I did make sure to use a matte finish because I wanted the matte appearance. Sometimes I'll use another one if it's just going underneath everything, because it doesn't matter, but they do have different finishes. But I'm just really careful when it comes to paint on metal because it does like to chip off. Then digging into my stash, I had this piece. This was from the Dollar Tree. It originally had a windmill attached to the top from, I think, their like garden area. So I wanted to pull this triangle metal piece off. Be very careful. I'm using a heat gun, and heat makes metal hot, so use with caution. There was only like 3 places across the bar I could tell that had any place where it was attached. So I focused on them, took my little scraper, I think that's called, actually it might be a putty knife, but and wedged that under, targeted the heat, bent it back and forth, and I got it off. I was trying to be careful because I didn't want to pull up and bend the welcome sign in doing this, so I tried to be really cautious and not bend that. And I did bend just a little bit, so I flipped it over, banged it down, smoothed it out. And then for the other piece for a sign, I have this MDF truck. I don't remember if this was from Dollar Tree or Hobby Lobby. It's been in my stash for a long time, and I like it, but what's the point of having it in my stash if I'm not going to use it? So we're going to give this one good coat. I'm using Waverly chalk paint in the color ink, and I am making sure to get all of the edges. So it took a little bit just to get all of the edges on the tire and the truck bed and all of that, but it's painting. It's not hard. Give it a good coat. I went with black for my choice today. Once I was done painting it and it dried, I did go ahead and seal this with Mod Podge. I don't know if that was necessary for this particular piece of material, but I did it. I figured, why not? Now we're going to go ahead and assemble our sign. And of course I got to cover up those holes on the side of the sign. And twine, jute twine, is Rustic and Farmhouse. So we're going to go around. This is a thicker jute twine. I picked it up at a thrift store for a really low price. It is huge. It is a huge spool of jute twine. It still had the packaging on it. It was originally from Hobby Lobby. And I will be using this literally forever. I mean, I don't know that I will ever run out of it. But it's great to have on hand. So I'm going to glue this. Now I'm using hot glue, and I'm doing small sections because hot glue on metal will dry fast. So truth be told, if I wanted to go around and pull this twine off, I probably could. But it's on there really good. But if I needed to pull it off, it would come off because it's hot glue on metal. But it's not going anywhere on its own. I just did little sections at a time. And I did go twice around, and then I'm using a lighter. This is to burn off the fuzzies from the jute twine, but also like glue strings, because I use so much hot glue. I just wanted to kind of clean up that a little bit, and I like the burnt look it gives to jute twine as well. So burn that off carefully, don't play with fire. And now we're going to attach everything. I did not finish the back, I just left it metal, but you can feel free to do that if that bothers you. Or maybe you don't need to because you're not using a metal clipboard. That's not standard for most people, but this is for inspiration. So I'm using the Gorilla Household Glue. I did smear it with my fingers on like the small places because I didn't want there to be any thick pieces thick parts of the glue that would like ooze out the edge. So I just wanted like a thin layer there. And I put a little bit of hot glue in the center for that quick hold. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the welcome sign. And then I did weight this down with some pieces to just make sure that it had really good contact while that household glue dried, because that takes a little bit longer than the hot glue. But I wanted to make sure that it had a good attachment. And that's how this one came out. Let me know what you think down below. I was pleased with this simple little piece. That's it for today's video. If you liked it, once again, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you are new. Let me know down in the comments which one of these was your favorite. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.